Hi everyone! In this video I want to share my personal story of how for 5 or 6 years I struggled to build a body that I would be proud of and how I eventually achieved this goal. I don't want to convince anyone to anything and I don't want to prove anyone wrong. I don't have any agenda. I just want to talk about my own personal journey and share my own experiences. Let's start from the beginning. Here's the picture from my very first calisthenics training. Or rather street workout, because this is how we called it back then. The picture was taken in June 2012. At this point I was 20 and I was about to finish my first year in the university. In the uni I had to choose a PE class and I picked training at the gym. So at this point I had been lifting weights regularly, twice a week if I recall correctly, for about 8 months. I've never been training anything consistently prior to that, but I always liked to move a lot as a kid. In my opinion, I looked accordingly to what an average person with my experience should look like. I built some muscle and size overall, although I had a lot of fat. Besides that, I had a rather poorly developed chest. Recently, I've discovered that the probable reason for that was my bad posture, namely pulled forwards shoulders. I know, my face looked completely different and I actually had some hair on top of my head, not just under it, but that's irrelevant for this video. At this point I was a couple of months into a very basic bodybuilding diet of a student on a tight budget. I focused on eating a lot of protein, and the most budget-friendly products to accomplish that goal were chicken breasts, eggs, cottage cheese and whey protein powder. The rest of the calorie intake was filled with cheap carbs such as potatoes, rice, bread, pasta and some vegetables. Oh, and a lot of booze. Like the most freshmen did, I was partying a lot and drinking a lot. That's what we all did. Most of us living on our own for the first time. Somewhere around this time I got introduced to a vegan diet by a friend of mine. I liked the idea of not having to take part in factory farming and getting the supposed health benefits. So I decided to experiment with the diet myself and see if it works as people claimed. In the beginning I liked it a lot and I was discovering new flavors and foods such as lentils, chickpeas or tofu. I kept on training hard and I was getting stronger and I even built some more muscle. I was really happy with this vegan diet, so that's why I went on with it. I still didn't look great, but I thought it's because I was training for strength and skills, not necessarily for the looks. However, after around 2 years of consistent training, I still looked the same. Some of you are probably now shouting at the screen,
"Oh, of course you didn't look good. It's all because you didn't eat meat."
Well, I didn't believe that to be true because the internet was full of people who were claiming that they were following the vegan diet and they looked great. Like this guy, and this guy, or this guy, or this guy. So during these first couple of years since I started training, I think I tried every type of plant-based diet there is. I was eating high fat, I was eating low fat, I was eating raw, I was eating cooked, I was eating fruitarian, I was trying to limit calories, I was trying to eat as much calories as I could, and nothing really gave me solid results. I tried supplementing with protein powders, I took vitamin D, I injected myself with B12. Believe me, when I say that I tried everything I could think of to make it work, I did just that. The best results that I have were when I was trying to eat as much protein as I could. That involved eating lentils, beans, chickpeas and tofu in large amounts all day in every meal, plus the protein shakes. I didn't feel great on this diet though, because I was stuffed and bloated most of the time. But at least I was putting on weight, although that weight was probably half fat and half muscle. Apart from trying to optimize my diet, I started to experiment with the training as well. I thought to myself that maybe I wasn't training hard enough, or I needed to start lifting more weights. So I've tried all the different types of hypertrophy training, both calisthenics and weightlifting, in combination with various types of cardio, and was never satisfied with the results. Oh, and speaking of cardio, during one summer I left the city where I was studying and went back to my hometown for the vacation. That was over 2 years after I started training calisthenics. All of my workout friends had stayed there, and my motivation for working out was pretty low, so I almost completely stopped doing it. I think I just practiced some handstands, and that was it. At the same time, I got interested in cycling and bought my first road bike. During those 3 months, I rode something close to 2,000 kilometers, sometimes riding several hours a day. I lost around 15 kilograms of weight, if I remember correctly, most of that, of course, in muscles. These pictures were taken right after that period. Despite of doing so much cardio, I still had pretty high fat body percentage. Not that I was fat, because I never was, but I was expecting to be much more shredded after doing so much cardio. The muscles were gone, but the fat stayed with me. At some point, I just gave up on the idea of trying to make myself look good, blamed it all on the poor genetics, and tried to focus on building strength and learning skills. The next couple of years had passed really quickly, and around 5 years after I began training calisthenics, I started losing my love for it. I wasn't getting much stronger anymore, and I felt unsatisfied with the way my body looked, considering how much I was working out. The feeling of trying to make something work very hard but seeing no results was slowly killing my passion. At this point, I already started my calisthenics channel, so I still trained regularly, but for a long time it felt like I was training a minimum amount just to stay in shape. So approximately a year ago, I was at a point where I knew that if I wanted to continue on that path that I chose, I needed a change. Or at least I needed to validate the doubts that were building up at the back of my head. What if the reason why I'm not performing or looking as well as I'd like to is my diet? This question started popping into my mind more and more frequently. After years of living with the mentality that vegan diet is just as good for developing a body, I really didn't want to go back to eating animal products again. But I needed this for the sake of my mental health. So at first I reintroduced eggs into my diet. To be honest, I didn't see much difference overall, but I liked the way I felt after eating a meal composed of a couple of boiled eggs and a bunch of vegetables. Comparing it to an oatmeal or some other kind of high carb meal, I didn't feel so stuffed and heavy. It didn't take much time until I took another step forward and started eating fish from time to time. The outcome of that decision was very similar, no noticeable changes in my body or performance, but not having to eat carbs all day was very refreshing. This continued for another couple of weeks until I went to travel through Asia. My diet during this time was all over the place. I wasn't able to cook for myself, so I was eating mostly street food, which almost always included some kind of meat. At this point, I removed all the restrictions from myself and ate whatever seemed tasty. Lots of tropical fruits and typical Asian meals were the base of my diet. To be honest, I was expecting to see some more noticeable changes after eating meat again, but that just wasn't the case. I felt pretty much the same and my body looked the same as well. People were always saying that the problem of plant-based diet is not enough protein, but after adding it back, I still didn't see any significant change. Now let's fast forward to the end of 2018. My daily life had finally stabilized, so I began experimenting with the diet again. What I knew so far was that vegan diet didn't work for my goals, but just adding meat or eggs didn't change much either. So I began experimenting with a different approach, thinking, what if I tried limiting my carbs? I've never tested that because it's almost impossible to do so on a vegan diet because all the plant foods are mostly carbs. At first I cut out the products that were just pure carbs, such as potatoes, rice, pasta or bread. If I wanted to eat carbs, it had to be something high in protein, such as lentils, beans or quinoa. To my surprise, I started noticing some minor changes in the way my body looked and felt. With this newly acquired motivation, I decided to push this diet to extremity and eliminate all the carbs, which basically meant a low-carb diet. All I was eating was meat, eggs, fish, nuts and seeds, different oils and vegetables. And that was the moment where everything started changing more rapidly. I started losing fat pretty quickly, but my muscle mass stayed the same or even started increasing slowly. I felt very lightweight and agile throughout the whole day, and my energy levels were very stable. On top of that, I stopped having any cravings whatsoever, so keeping this diet was very easy. Now it's been around 3 months since I started following it rigorously, and these are the results so far. I think the difference is huge, and I feel and look the best I have ever felt and look in my whole life. As far as my understanding goes, the problem of my diet wasn't the lack of protein, it was the significant excess of carbohydrates. Probably people have different capacity for storing and processing carbs, and mine has to be pretty low. Others may have it way higher, and that's why they can succeed on a carb-heavy diet. And by succeed, I mean build lean muscle mass and generally a body that performs well in a strength discipline such as calisthenics. What's worth adding is that my training hasn't changed at all since I adopted this new diet. I'm just able to do more reps because I don't have to lift all that excess fat weight anymore. I'm really happy with the progress so far, but I can feel that it's only the beginning of my transformation. I'm still learning and trying to figure out all the details, but at least now I can see that it's all going into the right direction. Now let me just say that I would love it if the vegan diet had worked just as good for my current goals. I don't really care for the taste or texture of the meat. I was perfectly happy with these aspects of a plant-based diet. If I didn't care about building lean muscle mass or my performance, I'll probably continue eating this way because the vegan diet is just simply far better from a moral standpoint. Of course, there's an argument that there are people who feel the same way I do, but choose to sacrifice their goals for the cause. I honestly admire this kind of altruism, but I just don't have enough empathy to do so. The final point I want to make is that the most important thing that this whole experience has taught me is that you should never blindly follow other people's advice. You should just use it as a reference point for your own experimentation and get to your own conclusions. People are different and have different goals, so what will work for one person may not necessarily work for you.